Everyone, a massive drop in first quarter GDP. The U.S. economy shrinking by nearly 3%. That's the biggest decline in a revision since they actually started keeping track of this stuff back in 1976. Now, part of the reason here, a slowdown in health care spending. So, hey, enough about the weather. Is Obamacare really what needs to be blamed here? Here were some answers. Mike McKee, Bloomberg economics editor, Stephen Moore, chief economist at the Heritage Foundation, and Robert Zimmerman, Democratic strategist and co-founder of PR firm Zimmerman Edelson. I'll start with you, Stephen. Is this a bad sign in terms of Obamacare and what it might eventually mean for the economy?
Well, actually, if healthcare spending is falling, that's actually a good thing for the economy, not a bad thing. And remember, we were going to do this to bend the cost curve down. But look, here's the problem. When you get a 3% decline in the GDP in the first quarter, it means any hope that we're going to get 3% or plus growth this year, you can just erase that. I mean, even if we get 3% growth in the second quarter, we're right back where we started. And so this is a pretty dismal performance. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat this, and there's no way to blame the weather on a 3% decline in GDP.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty significant drop. But, you know, Mike, you and I were talking about this earlier. You're in a situation here where the government anticipated a much bigger spend on health care, and that was part of the reason why this revision is as low as it is.
Yeah, this is not a political criticism of Obamacare. It's a mathematical one. The assumption was that a lot of people who didn't go to the doctor because they didn't have insurance would get that insurance and then go to the doctor. But they didn't. The Commerce Department assumed that you would have a 1% addition to GDP from all these people spending more money on health care. Instead, what it turns out to be is a subtraction, a net subtraction of about 16 basis points. So you have a big swing from the original report of a slight growth in the first quarter to a big negative print. And
so
we also,
and that, by the way, that might be because people lost health insurance. Well, remember, people lost health insurance at the end of last year.
But most of them got it back, Steve.
Yeah.
You know, let's put this in some perspective for a moment. First of all, you can't just discount the weather. Obviously, when utility spending increased by 40% for consumers, they had to constrain their costs elsewhere because of the severe weather. And we're seeing actually in the most recent economic indicators for April and May that in fact businesses are investing now in capital investments. We're seeing consumer spending up in the car dealerships and in retail. So there is some progress to be had here.
We've been so disappointed now for 5 years. I mean, we've just never had a breakout in the GDP.
Well,
so every time we have a bad GDP report, we say, oh, but it's going to be better in the next 6 months.
That's a bit of what I call economic twerking. Okay. It's a cheap thrill and gimmick. It's a great gimmick and a cheap thrill for the conservative base to be able to say that. But we have, in fact, seen a growth and a consistent recovery. Maybe 2%. Not as fast as we would like, but we're clearly seeing.
But it's the lowest we've had since the Great Depression.
Well, look, we had also the worst recession since the Great Depression.
Well, not worse than the ones in the early 80s.
No
yes, worse than the ones in the early 80s.
Kidding? We had a 10-year depression.
And we're seeing the jobs
GDP decline
was
the greatest since the Great Depression. So
I still remember the 70s. That was a pretty bad.